tale of the Flopsy Bunnies. For all little friends of Mr. McGregor and Peter and Benjamin. It is said that the effect of eating too much lettuce is soporific. I have never felt sleepy after eating lettuces, but then I am not a rabbit. They certainly had a very soporific effect upon the Flopsy Bunnies. They're Flopsy. Look at them flopsing. When Benjamin Bunny grew up, he married his cousin Flopsy. They had a large family, and they were very improvident and cheerful. I do not remember the separate names of their children. They were generally called the Flopsy Bunnies. See, they're flopsing. As there was not always quite enough to eat, Benjamin used to borrow cabbages from Flopsy's brother, Peter Rabbit, who kept a nursery garden. Oh, that's him getting ready to steal cabbage. Sometimes Peter Rabbit had no cabbages to spare. Shall we eat nuns for our supper? When this happened, the Flopsy Bunnies went across the field to a rubbish heap in the ditch outside Mr. McGregor's garden. Rubbish heap. Mr. McGregor's rubbish heap was a mixture. There were jam pots and paper bags and mountains of chopped grass from the mowing machine, which always tasted oily, and some rotten vegetable marrows, and an old boot or two. One day, oh joy, there were a quantity of overgrown lettuces, which had shot into flower. Oh, see the lettuces. They're shooting into flower. Bunnies eat them. The Flopsy Bunnies simply stuffed lettuces by degrees. One after another, they were overcome with slumber and lay down in the mown grass. Oh, they ate too much and they got Flopsy. Benjamin was not so overcome as his children. Before going to sleep, he was sufficiently wide awake to put a paper bag over his head to keep off the flies. That's pretty smart. Is that what this is for, Appa? You don't like flies? Oh, there's the paper bag. Keep off flies. Good trick. The little Flopsy Bunnies slept delightfully in the warm sun. From the lawn beyond the garden came the distant clackety sound of the mowing machine. The blue bottles buzzed about the wall, and a little old mouse picked over the rubbish among the jam pots. I can tell you her name. She was called Thomasina Tittlemouse, a wood mouse with a long tail. Oh, you gotta see her. She's a beaut. Look. It's Thomasina Tittlemouse. A wood mouse with a long tail. She rustled across the paper bag and awakened Benjamin Bunny. The mouse apologized profusely and said that she knew Peter Rabbit. Oh, thanks for, plugging the other books. While she and Benjamin were talking close under a wall, they heard a heavy tread above their heads. And suddenly, Mr. McGregor emptied out a sack full of lawn mowings right upon the top of the sleeping Flopsy Bunnies. Benjamin shrank down under his paper bag. The mouse hid in a jam pot. shaped and learn. Jam pot. The little rabbits smiled sweetly in their sleep under the shower of grass. They did not awake because the lettuces had been so soporific. They dreamt that their mother Flopsy was tucking them up in a hay bed. Mr. McGregor looked down after emptying his sack. He saw some funny little brown tips of ears sticking up through the lawn mowings. He stared at them for some time. Look, it's the farmer's shoes. And some bunnies under grass. Too much grass, yo. Presently, a fly settled on one of them, and it moved. Mr. McGregor climbed down onto the rubbish heap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits, said he as he dropped them into his sack. Sack them. The Flopsy Bunnies dreamt that their mother was turning them over in bed. They stirred a little in their sleep, but they did not wake up. The bunnies. He got them in a sack. Oh shit. Mr. McGregor tied up the sack and left it on the wall. He wanted to put away that mowing machine. While he was gone, Mrs. Flopsy Bunny, who had remained at home, came across the field. She looked suspiciously at the sack and wondered where everybody was. Where are they? Then the mouse came out of her jam pot, and Benjamin took the paper bag off his head, and they told the doleful tale. Benjamin and Flopsy were in despair. They could not undo the string. That's, I can do that. It's easy. Oh, he sleeps with shoes on. That's nice. Mrs. Tittlemouse was a resourceful person. She nibbled a hole in the bottom corner of the sack. Go, Miss Little Tillmouse. Thomasina? The little rabbits were pulled out and pinched to wake them. Itch. Oh! Don't wake me, I'm tired. Their parents stuffed the empty sack with 3 rotten vegetable marrows, an old blacking brush, and 2 decayed turnips. Then they all hid under a bush and watched for Mr. McGregor. Hiding under bush. See that? Hide under the bush. Okay, hide. Hide under the bush. Don't see me. Hide under the bush. Mr. McGregor came back and picked up the sack and carried it off. He carried it hanging down like it were rather heavy. The Flopsy Bunnies followed at a safe distance. Oh, they're still alive. They got out of the sack. They watched him go into his house, and then they crept up to the window to listen. Rabbits are spies. They listen to you. Mr. McGregor threw down the sack on the stone floor in a way that would have been extremely painful to the Flopsy Bunnies if they had happened to have been inside it. They could hear him drag his chair on the flags and chuckle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits, said Mr. McGregor. Eh? What's that? What have they been spoiling now? Inquired Mrs. McGregor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits. Fat ones, repeated Mr. McGregor, counting on his fingers. Don't you be silly. What do you mean, you silly old man? In the sack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, replied Mr. McGregor. The youngest Flopsy Bunny got up upon the windowsill. Mrs. McGregor took hold of the sack and felt it. She said she could feel 6, but they must be old rabbits because they were so hard and all different shapes. They're hard and different shapes. You know, just like an old rabbit. Not fit to eat, but the skins will do fine to line my old cloak. This one I was thinking about getting it relined with like rabbit skin. And the shoes too. Rabbit skin leather is hot this year. Line your old cloak, shouted Mr. McGregor. I shall sell them and buy myself baccy, which is slang for tobacco. Rabbit tobacco? I shall skin them and cut off their heads. That is usually what happens to rabbits if farmers get them. And I don't know what rabbit tobacco is, though. Rabbits are spies. Mrs. McGregor untied the sack and put her hand inside. When she felt the vegetables, she became very, very angry. She said that Mr. McGregor had done it on purpose. Rabbits, they're eavesdropping on your conversation. They know about the money. And Mr. McGregor was very angry too. One of the rotten marrows came flying through the kitchen window and hit the youngest Flopsy Bunny. Oh no, he was rather hurt. Right by a rotten marrow. It's actually a serious injury. They're going to take him off the roster. Then Benjamin and Flopsy thought that it was time to go home. So Mr. McGregor did not get his tobacco, and Mrs. McGregor did not get her rabbit skins. But next Christmas, Thomasina Tittlemouse got a present of enough rabbit wool to make herself a cloak and a hood, and a handsome muff and a pair of warm mittens. Look at her handsome muff that she got this year at Christmas. Oh, Thomasina Tittlemouse, you look ravishing. That's the end. Oh no, just when I felt like it was going somewhere. Beatrix, you done it again.